So thank you again for attending today's webinar, Transitioning from MIM to Microsoft Entra ID, Future-Proofing Identity Management. It's the first part of a three-part webinar series we're going to be doing over the next 2 months. So today we're really going to talk about MIM, Entra ID, what it's about, and why you should start transitioning now rather than waiting till 2029 when MIM does go out of support. So let's begin. So today's agenda, we'll have a little MIM history. I'm sure everyone here is attending has some knowledge about MIM, why transition away from MIM, some of the advantages of Microsoft Entra ID. With being in Entra ID now, you do have the option of having identity governance, so we'll talk about that. We're going to review a customer story that has moved from MIM to Entra ID, and we'll talk a little bit about getting started. How can you get started on this journey from MIM to Microsoft Entra ID? And at the end, we will have some questions that were posted before that I will reveal, and we're also going to have some polls. So if you can fill those out, that'd be great. So I'm not going to spend too long on our marketing slides here, but again, Oxford Computer Group, some of the things we do, not just identity management, we're also security with endpoint management, Sentinel. We've been around for 20 plus years. And some of the products and things we offer, identity access, identity governance, security, and some of the business cases we do provide. All right, so a little bit of MIM history. Again, I think a lot of people on this webinar know about MIM, but kind of wanted to show really the timeline here, and it's been around for a long time now. So in 1999 is when Microsoft bought Zoomit, and they had a product called VIA. It was branded with Microsoft as MMS, Meta Directory Services, and it was really only used by Microsoft Consultant Services. So if you weren't doing consulting for Microsoft, it really wasn't a mainstream product. Not until 2003 when MIS came out, Microsoft Identity Integration Server. That was really the first mainstream that anyone could access it, anyone can use it, and it was used heavily by lots of companies. So in 2007, and before 2007, there was an acquisition for certificate lifecycle management product, and that was rolled into the new version of MIS, Identity Lifecycle Management, which included certificate lifecycle management. I'm not going to talk too much about CLM, but Identity Lifecycle Management Manager was still basically MIS. Not until 2010, where there was a major change here that I'm sure everyone knows about. FIM, Forefront Identity Management. The sync engine was still there, but they did introduce the FIM portal, which gave you the ability to have workflows, more robust AD group management, approvals, workflow activities, so you can send emails. So that was built in, gave you some more options for identity management. And it also introduced the more codeless provisioning services that you can configure provisioning and deprovisioning without C# or VB code. It's really not on this timeline, but there was that big R2 service pack with FIM that gave you more reporting capabilities. And then in 2016, Microsoft branded FIM to MIM that we have today, Microsoft Identity Manager. And over the last 4 years, there's been lots of questions about what's happening to MIM, what's going to happen to it. Microsoft released at first that end of life would be 2026, and listening to them, I think the big thing is they needed to give people more time to move off the platform, so they did extend it. And currently, that is still the date. 2029 is going to be the end of support for MIM. So brief history, but putting this together, I realized this is really 30 years. This is someone made a career out of this. So MIM's been here for a long time, and it's amazing how much faster pace it is that all these different tools are being put in Entra ID, and it's only been years, and we see a lot of headwinds with this. So let's continue on our MIM history journey here. So why migrate from MIM? I mean, there's lots of reasons. I probably could have put 20 different bullets here, but kind of wanted to put these in some buckets here in no particular order. But MIM can be complex. It does require significant customization and technical effort. It's getting hard to find people that know MIM and to work on it. If you're not looking at a consultant company like OCG or some other consultant companies out there, it's hard to put probably a job bid out there and get someone with a resume with MIM. And you do have to think about the maintenance with MIM. All the SQL servers that are involved, SQL does involve maintenance. So do you have your SQL team doing it, the maintenance on it? There's always been issues where if you don't structure your SQL correctly, your logs get full, you run out of space, things like that. You do have to rely on, upgrades over the years, service packs, hot fixes, SharePoint. SharePoint sometimes, over the years you can't use your free SharePoint anymore, so you have to upgrade SharePoint. So there is a lot of infrastructure that you do still have to maintain with MIM. Not counting if you do want to load balance the portal. So if you are using the portal as maybe an admin resource, you might not load balance it, but if you're using it for your end users to do some password resets, the self-service password reset, you probably want to load balance it. So you have to have that infrastructure in place, which you do have to have DNS entries and certificates for SSL. And again, bringing back, if you're not using the declarative or codeless solution, which is can be basic. A lot of people don't use it. You still have to have that VB and C# knowledge. So for scalability and limitations, MIM struggles for large scale, cloud first organizations. There's limited adaptability to dynamic changes such as mergers or evolving IT landscapes. Adding an MA, for people that know MIM, maybe it doesn't take a long time, but a lot of companies say adding MAs, is a long customization if needed. You have to truly understand APIs and how they connect and how to build them in a C# code. So that can be limited there. Limited cloud integration. MIM was designed for on-premise environments with minimal cloud capabilities. Again, you could, connect to cloud solutions, but it comes back to that customization of a management agent to connect to it. We also have governance and reporting features. Governance features like entitlement management and access reviews are limited. If we would go back to that timeline, you could say, yes, it was there at one point, if you remember Behold, but there wasn't much traction with Behold, and Microsoft decided to remove it and not support it anymore. So currently that is not there. And again, limited auditing and reporting. FIMR2, did give you some reporting, but it wasn't really highly adopted due to the big lift in infrastructure and maintenance. You did have to have all those SQL servers and data warehouse processes, all that for maybe out of the box 8 reports. Or you had to know, SQL reporting services, and it still didn't probably give you enough that you needed. So more, we're going to learn about more reporting features in Entra ID. As for governance, you could say entitlement management was in the MIM portal, but really only for AD groups. If you wanted a different type of entitlement type for a different application, you really needed to customize the portal for those needs, which took a lot of development time. and was complex. So cumbersome user experience, the user interface in FIM and MIM, it's outdated. If you look at it, it runs on top of SharePoint. There's not many controls you can put in there. It was less intuitive for users. Um, and of course, end of life cycle concerns. As we see, 2029 is only 4 years away. So if you're thinking about moving with 4 years, it's time to start thinking about it. I think Gartner sometimes would say a a new identity management product, maybe from birth takes 5 years, but if you're moving to another platform, I would definitely say that 4 years, it's time to start thinking about it. So some of the advantages of Microsoft Entra ID, it's designed for cloud environments, provides seamless integration with cloud native applications and services. Um, MIM primarily is on premise and does have limited cloud capabilities. Entra ID has thousands of SaaS apps in their gallery for different types of integration and logic app connectors that can be used and configured with less code. Which brings us, to codeless solutions. Um, Codeless, Entra ID does support codeless identity and access scenarios, making it easier to maintain and support compared to more complex configurations often required with MIM. Codeless solutions meaning that you're not writing VB C# code and compiling DLLs that you have to manage in MIM. It's more expression language with functions. So think about if you're manipulating and transforming data, you're using those trim or substring or split functions that you've seen before to put together your codeless solution. Again, I'm not going to say everything is perfectly codeless. You do need logic. If we talk about logic apps, uh, I kind of bring up the story that the workforce is changing. A lot of people are learning differently. Um, if they are in the Microsoft stack, they know about logic apps, function apps, power apps. All these things are more codeless and user friendly. Of course, it does take logic. You still have to be smart to put this all together, but you may not have to find someone that is a hard code developer that knows C# or VB. So administrative security features, I bring this up because, MIM really didn't have the easiest security to implement in the portal. And in the sync engine, you had a few groups to control the configuration. Um, you know, the portal required, again, a good amount of work to allow configuration changes, you know, if you didn't want people to be admins. So the sync engine, it was pretty much everyone's in the sync admins group, and in the portal, everyone's in that admins set. That's how you gave access. If you wanted to customize it, all those different RCDCs that or not those group policy rules that you had to put in there, um, they were very hard to do and time consuming. So we're looking ahead at Entra ID now where you have built-in roles like identity governance role, lifecycle management role, and PIM can now be used to elevate into that. And you can also make different owners on your access packages for delegation, which is part of Entra ID governance, which we'll examine shortly here. I think that the reason to bring up security of your configuration is that identity management solutions over the years have become very critical. I think they've always been critical, but I'm sure there's stories out there where, if someone makes a change incorrectly, it can affect your downstream applications. So elevated access with approvals can help with your change control process. So you will have the ability as someone that has to make sure that they um, use privileged access or privilege identity management, PIM, to elevate their rights. And if there's an approval with that, someone's going to know about it. They're going to maybe ask for a change of control, and that helps from the mistakes that could happen in the configuration. So scalability and flexibility. Entra ID is highly scalable and flexible. It is a cloud solution. Uh, MIM, on the other hand, can struggle with scalability in large, cloud-first organizations. Sometimes MIM needs resources added over time to handle more overhead. Something changes in HR, you have an extra 50,000 users. If you didn't know about that, maybe that's too large. Maybe if if it was 50,000 users, you knew about it, but you'd probably have to put CPU, memory, and disk into that server. Entra ID is going to handle that for you. User experience, maybe nothing to do with actual MIM, but if you're going to Entra ID, the modern user experience, features are going to, with SSO, SSPR, it makes it more, intuitive. It also offers, security measures such as multi-factor, conditional access policies, real-time threat detection, which MIM doesn't have. So really what you're doing, MIM's great at provisioning accounts and maybe some access, but that's really about it. Entra ID gives you the ability to give people the access they need, but then they're going to get continuously evaluated to make sure their sessions are safe. And if something does change, conditional access policies, or they can detect that and revoke users if needed. So reduced administrative overhead, again, a no-brainer here. If you are going to Entra ID, less need for on-premise infrastructure, simplifies the management there, and it could be a cost saving for that administration effort. So compliance and governance, Entra ID provides, robust compliance and governance features, including entitlement management, which will review access reviews, PIM. This is helping organizations meet regulatory requirements more effectively than MIM. And then the final thing here is integration with the Microsoft ecosystem. Um, it does fully integrate with it. You know, you know, we can integrate with the Defender stack. That can send signals to Sentinel about an account, and an action can be taken. Um, it's just not about provisioning and access. Again, it's about gaining your access, and then other offerings that Microsoft Entra provides, like continuous evaluation access or conditional access policies, are there for you. Something that was not in the MIM product. So we touched on governance a couple times in the following slides. And so what is Microsoft Entra ID governance? So Entra ID governance, there's probably lots of definitions, but really with Microsoft Entra ID governance, and, it provides you the capabilities to ensure that the right people have the right access to the right resources at the right time. Um, so this wheel shows the different workloads of Entra identity governance. So we have proper onboarding with HR inbound provisioning from Workday and SAP, and I like to call it bring your own HR. We have access lifecycle management, which are lifecycle workflows and access packages to help you onboard and get that joiner, mover, leaver solution going. Then you have your secured privilege access, which is privilege identity management in Entra ID. And then with all of that, once that is done, you do want to review your access rights, so you have access recertification or access reviews. So lifecycle workflows, these are built-in templates that you can use, common templates for joiner, mover, leaver with built-in tasks. So generating passwords, one-time passwords, you can enable group assignments, you can enable and disable accounts, knowing now that you can reach on-premise AD with that. So it's not just enabling and disabling a cloud account. If you are mastered from Active Directory for that account in your tenant, you can actually disable and enable those AD accounts. Um, you can do license assignments. You can add people to application packages. So there's various built-in tasks that you can assign to people based off of these workflows. So um, these workflows are based off of scope of users and a trigger. So you can assign this workflow to only employees and even maybe down to a department level. And the trigger would be maybe for onboarding their start date. That would get triggered, the task would complete. Add them to a couple of groups, send an email to their manager, maybe send that manager a one-time password for them to log in. The movers are a little bit different when they change work. So you can trigger based off of attributes. So the department, maybe job title changes. Let's do something different. Let's remove them from these groups and add them to these other groups. And again, that's based off of a scope. So you can create different workflows for maybe contractors this time for removers. And of course, leavers, you're disabling based off of maybe an end date. So those end dates are there. Proper lever solution with this workflow can happen. These are automatic, but there is a schedule. You do have to provide a schedule when these workflows run. They'll fall in, they'll get detected, but every X hours is there, so you could run it every hour. It's not in the minutes. It's currently an hour. Of course, all the way up to 24 hours, but depending on your SLA, you would adjust that setting there. And you can do manual workflows. So you can create a workflow and manually run them. This is good if you're testing something, or maybe you want to make a change to a specific group of users. Something's changed. I don't want to wait an hour, or I want to just do this to a couple people at a time. I can create one that's manually run. It does the task, and I just say run manually, and it completes. What's nice about these workflows also that really you didn't have in MIM, you really can see what's happening. So you can see the reporting on these. What happened? Did it complete? Did it fail? So it's really good with reporting and auditing. So you can go back and see what happened. Was it this task? Maybe all these tasks ran, but this final task did not run. It also is really good for versioning support. So you can look at the different versions of your workflow and decide, oh, I made this change at at version 10. In version 12, I made a change that's not working right. So I can go back to 10 and see how it was running. So it's very good with version support. And if there's a task in there that you or it's a specific task that's not in there, you do have the ability to call a custom extension, and that custom extension uses logic apps. So if you look up logic apps, there's probably thousands of connectors there. So the common scenario would be I onboard someone, I add them to groups, I send an email to the manager, and I've created a custom extension that talks to a logic app that connects to ServiceNow and gives me the ability to open a ticket for this user. This ticket could be that this user's here, please start procuring their laptop. So it extends outside of Entra ID or any resource that's in Entra ID, which is all the gallery apps and all the logic apps. So very powerful there. So we're still kind of on that 3 o'clock wheel with the identity management. We got people provisioned. We gave them some access. The lifecycle workflows probably are good for cloud only users. They could be for AD mastered users, but you have to create the AD account, then they have to come back up. So if you're looking at maybe start or end dates, that's not always in your your Active Directory, you would have to maybe use a custom extension there, or one of those extension, 1 through 15 that they have out there. It's really when you work with the Workday and the SAP connectors that Microsoft has, that's where you can use those joiners with those start dates. But if it's not going to be a lifecycle workflow, you can use entitlement management. So entitlement management, think of it as Microsoft's approach to having to a roles-based solution. So an access package within entitlement management can be a package that has multiple resources in it. It can have groups, it can have team sites, SharePoint sites, applications. That could be rolled up into an access package. And once you become part of that package, you gain access to that resource. But it does give you the ability for multiple policies. So if you weren't able to use a lifecycle workflow, you can use a policy that's an auto-assign policy, and it's similar to your dynamic group criteria. So users department equals marketing, add them to this access package. But maybe people don't belong to marketing, they need access to that access package. They can also use another policy that makes it approval based. So someone could request it, someone can approve it, and they can gain access to it. They also can put timers on there. They can say, if I'm going to, if it is approved, you only have, 8 hours for this, or 2 weeks. Maybe it's a project I'm working on. You can make time-bound decisions on that access. So it's part of the journey there. You get onboarded, you get some access rights, maybe by birthright. Maybe I have to request additional access. That's what entitlement management does. Within that access package, I can say, which we'll talk about in the next few slides, I want to do a review on this access package. And then my job changes, I get removed from it. And that's where the access review comes along. We can take a look at it periodically, make sure everyone still has the rights that they should have, or if they still have rights they shouldn't, the access review can be looked at, and you can deny those permissions for that person. So that's, again, brief entitlement management. So PIM, I'm sure everyone knows about PIM. Did a webinar last year on privileged access management with Savient, but did talk about PIM because is PIM PAM or is PAM PIM? It can be confusing, but really look at PIM here as a way to elevate your access in Entra ID. It's taking your current account and elevating you. PAM has different ways of doing that. PAM has the ability to check out specific accounts, rotate passwords. So it is a little different. So PIM, again, talking about why it's better to go here for security-based features. I'm assigned roles, but I'm not using them. I'm still logged into Entra, doing my daily work, but I do have to make a change to the to a Entra ID lifecycle workflow, so I can make that role eligible for specific users that they have to go in there, elevate their rights. Maybe for that role, it's not going to be weeks, it's going to be maybe 4 hours. They can elevate it, they get access, they make the change. Of course, it had to be approved by someone. It went to maybe a change control person, they approved it. So we have all those in there. So we know someone's making a change, we have it all audited. So again, some of the things that you can do with PIM is you can enforce multi-factor, you can enforce approvals, you can get notifications, you can conduct access reviews on them. And it does provide that audit history for internal and external audits. So going back to access reviews, we heard about them. Again, you have them in your access packages, you have that in PIM, but you also can manually create one. You can create an access review for any resource in Entra ID, teams, group memberships, access to enterprise applications, and role assignments. So these are basically reviews that you specify, and you can specify different people that do approve these reviews. So currently it is based on the actual resource. So I'd have to make a review tagging different resources, and it would be sent to the approver, and they're going to see who's in that resource. And again, they can approve it or deny it. Not going to get too much into it, but there's different uh, advanced options where you can automate this. So if someone did disapprove, when the review is over, it automatically removes it. You don't have to put that in there, especially when you're first starting access reviews. You might not want people denying everything and all of a sudden people don't have the access they need. You just might want to see that as a report and do it manually and make sure it's something that needs to be done. So access reviews are a good way to clean up. A lot of people use them for AD groups that have not been managed probably for 10 years. You're going to find someone that's in a group that when they first started and hasn't even been in that job role for 5 years. So take advantage of access reviews. We have been moving people from MIM to Entra ID. This is a customer is at a hospital with 600 patient beds, 5,500 employees. They wanted to modernize their identity management. They wanted to migrate from MIM to Microsoft Entra ID. Their main goal was to improve identity lifecycle management for Workday users. They were using Workday, and Workday is one of the connectors that you can use to import from Workday into Entra ID and decide if you want to provision to AD or a cloud user. That and SAP, success factors. So we went in there to help them with that solution. One of the things that did come out, so you see that, of course, we did the planning, the configuration, the design, the development, so they could configure Workday to automatically provision to AD. But we did realize that they did have a custom schema in Workday, and the API that the Workday connector application in Entra uses does not see a lot of the custom schemas in there. So luckily, when this project started, or first was in pre-sales, by the time it was going to start, the generic inbound API provisioning service was available. So that API inbound provisioning service, some of these things we're going to learn about in the next two webinars, but that gave us the ability to kind of take your own HR, take the data that you have, create your own schema, and send it to the provisioning service. That provisioning service then is similar to the Workday and SuccessFactors application with provision to the Active Directory. So it was a great project to see how that works. So there is flexibility there, because I know there's questions where people say they advance transformations of data. With that generally available, the inbound provisioning service, I think we'll be able to answer a lot of your questions. We also had to create an ID creation process. Again, that happens a lot of times in MIM. They had a solution in MIM that did that. It was a solution that they called out from MIM, and they got their unique ID. We were able to use that same API that they had, or SQL database, to call it, get that unique ID back, and put it back in our process, which sent the data to the provisioning service, that bulk update of JSON queries. So you do have the ability with Logic Apps to do a lot. So if you learned anything, take a look at Logic Apps. We enabled provisioning logs, we used log analytics, and we used workbooks to provide reports. They wanted to see how many accounts got created every day. So that's where that reporting comes in, something that you really couldn't do with MIM. And they wanted to create an identity governance roadmap. So this client really was taking MIM basic provisioning that they had, but they wanted to build on that. So once they saw what they could do, now they're looking at the identity governance piece, which is a different license, but they saw how powerful lifecycle workflows, application packages, and access reviews have become. So that did help them think about it, and hopefully phase two. But again, the benefits, they were able to decommission a lot of their MIM servers, their SQL servers. It did improve their security, and now they're looking to use Microsoft Identity Governance. And then one of the things they did, take away from this too is we talked about the security challenges in MIM. They had a lot of people managing it. They do like now that they can use PIM to make their changes. So they can have people go in, elevate the access, correct people know about it, prove it, and it's done. They did have some issues where people making changes sometimes didn't always work out correctly. So now they have that audit and approval solution. So how do we get started? I always like to start with current configuration documentation. A lot of organizations have it built maybe by consultants or people that over the years come and go. Do you really understand thoroughly, what MIM is doing? So, thoroughly document, your current or existing MIM configuration, your user provisioning, your group management, any custom workflows. Um, I put auxiliary processes, capture, any processes that complement MIM, such as, scripts that you don't see in the MIM interface. You might be calling PowerShell scripts. There could be file transfer jobs going on, SSIS packages, lookup tables, stored procedures. All this complements MIM. Make sure you know about that and how it does complement MIM. Requirement gathering. Collect business and technical requirements by engaging with stakeholders. You know, do we move the same process over? Maybe it's not needed anymore, or Entra, ID adds features to enhance processes. Think about that. Is it really working the way it's supposed to, or do you want it to work the same way? If it's been 10 years, there might be a better way to do something now. Like I want to, I want to add people to applications. I can do that now. I don't have to create a group. I don't have to create hundreds of groups now so I can assign that group to an application. I can use Entra ID with a lifecycle workflow or an access package to assign you directly to that application. So it could be helping you with all that group proliferation that goes on. Also, look at your edge cases. A lot of times people have edge cases and they turn out to be for 10 users. Is it really worth moving over that edge case for 10 users? It really comes down to process and management making a decision there. You know, Maybe it's not needed. Maybe a policy can be put in place to create a help desk ticket to solve this use case. You know, we've always been asked about the name change process. Can we automate it? We can automate it. Sometimes it's not too bad, but very complex name changes. Do you really want to spend 2 months of consultant time on that? It is very complex, and sometimes if it doesn't work, is it better just to say, you know what, the name's changing. I'm going to put a ticket in, and please just change my email alias and other things that I need. So think about that. Then look at the feature comparison. Compare the features of MIM and Entra ID and identify any gaps in any customization needs. Licensing needs, determine if additional, from the gap study there, do you need additional licensing? If you do want to go the identity governance route, you will need a new license for identity governance. But it does take a P1 or P2 if you do want to step up to that. And then overall, your migration strategy, develop one, develop a plan, outline what will be migrated and the steps involved. The upcoming webinars are going to talk about some of those strategies. So have a look out for that. So if you want to look at licensing needs, this QR code here, if you guys have a chance, capture that. It's just a link to a article here. I'm going to try to see if you guys see this. Let me know. Let's see this. This is a great chart here for the different options that you have for Entra ID and governance. So, I would say P1 does give you the ability probably to take a simple MIM solution that has a HR source provisioning to Active Directory. You probably could still do that with P1. Actually, you can. Um, P2 is going to give you a little bit more. Um, but I like this chart because if you don't know about some things, it has a nice little link here so you can learn about API provisioning, HR provisioning, and all the different things about Entra ID governance here. So again, if you have a chance, capture that code. After today's webinar, if you want, here is the QR code for our next part of the series, transitioning, from the MIM portal to Microsoft Entra ID. We're going to look at the MIM portal, knowing that a lot of those workloads in the portal can be moved, and you can be in a hybrid state. You can exist in Entra ID and still have your sync engine doing some minimal stuff on premise still. All right, we did get a lot of questions before the webinar. I know we don't have time to answer all of them, but I kind of wanted to put them into different buckets here based off of the question, and I put a question for each bucket here. So a lot of people wrote about migration and transition. There's going to be a different answer to a lot of this stuff, but how does migrating from MIM to Entra ID contrast with migrating to other platforms? Some people wrote the platforms down. I didn't really want to talk about those platforms. Obviously you're going to talk about the sale points, the Savients, the pings, the octas. I would say the big difference is most people on this webinar are using MIM, would mean they're using Active Directory, and there's a good chance that you're using Entra ID already. So you're on the platform. That's pretty much going to be your IDP. So that's something that you don't have to think about moving. You can go to other platforms to manage identity governance without changing IDPs. You can still use Entra ID, but you could take some of the workflows or some of the processes that you have in MIM to Entra ID. The one thing is your ECMA connectors, your custom EZMA, some people call them EZMA connectors. They are portable to Entra ID, so you can use those to provision to on-premises systems. That you can use them for LDAP directories, SQL. They have one out for PowerShell now, and they also have a SCIM connector. So all those custom connectors can be reused. That's one good thing that going to Entra ID is that you can reuse that custom connector. Capabilities and feature, which features, functions are not currently available in Entra ID that exist within MIM. I would say maybe some on-premise, very legacy applications, maybe that you have to provision to. I really couldn't think about much. I think a lot of these questions would have been different a year ago, and I probably could have had a lot of gaps. But um, again, with the very large gallery of logic apps and be able to connect to those if they're cloud applications, and even now you can connect to on-premise resources. With Arc, it gives you the ability to run agents and communicate to your on-premise services. There's not many gaps there. I mean, maybe something like an AS400 or something like that might be tough to do in Entra ID. I know a lot of people talked about complexity of MIM and transformations, and Microsoft does have a product called Data Factory, which we've been using, that consolidates a lot of um, your data points, your sources of authorities. It can consolidate it to one um, user record if needed, or it can make transformations. So there is a lot of capabilities out there to solve some of these advanced configurations that MIM does have. Security and compliance. There weren't too many. I think this was the only one there. I guess someone's concerned about putting your data in Entra ID. Um, I- I'm assuming it's an Active Directory now, and if it's not in a custom attribute um, or a attribute you created, a custom one you created in AD, a lot of almost everything is synced to Entra ID. So if you have sensitive data in AD, it might be in Entra ID already. But maybe you did create your own attributes and updated your schema. So you do have the ability now to create custom security attributes, which are um, encrypted. So you can use them for values and rules, but they are encrypted, so you cannot see them. So you cannot see that someone's custom security attribute, let's just call it shoe size. You'll be able to see that it's an attribute, but you won't be able to see the values in it. But you could put that in a rule, maybe for a dynamic group, saying that if shoe size equals 10, put me in this group. But it is an encrypted value, and you cannot see that data. So cost and support, of course, that's a big one. How does Entra ID pricing model differ from MIM? You know, it's currently, if you do have, I believe, a P1 or P2, you're using MIM, well, the license for MIM for free. You're just paying for your hardware and infrastructure on-prem. Entra ID, again, if you go look at that chart I put up on the screen. A lot of it can be done with P1, P2. If you do need the identity governance, you do have to step up to that license. I don't want to talk about costs. That's something you can talk about with your Microsoft or reseller account managers because everyone, probably does pay a different price of their agreements with those account managers. So there is some MSRP out there on that. There's some links there in that article I did post. So you can go and see what it could cost. But again, knowing your enterprise agreement or if you're a small company, you might be paying different prices. Some of the things do aren't included in the license. I would, specify. I talked about logic apps. They can be consumption based or, they cost per time you run it. That does not currently covered in that license. We talked about that data factory where we can consolidate data. That would be something that is not in the actual license itself also, and could be a support cost. So there is a subscription model there that could be the whole license model for you, or there could be some additional costs based off of how you configure it. Probably going to depend on the complexity of the environment. So with that, I know we are way over. Maybe our next webinars might have to be a little bit longer. If there's any other questions, let me look at the Q&A here. All right, I've got a few. I can review these. Password sync, yeah, that's we were just thinking about listening to that about that today. So Microsoft's stance on password sync from Entra ID is they're really not gonna do much about password sync, just because Microsoft's going to passwordless solutions. They can create passwords with the custom extensions. Those easy MAs, you can create an LDAP account with a password, but that password is not going to be synced. They are recommending that you modernize and go to more of a passwordless solution there. So the second question was from the same person. How will you handle provisioning into LDAP? You can use one of those easy MAs, either you have now or you can create your own in Entra ID. There is connectors for LDAP. So last one I have here is best place to begin creating workflows, lifecycle processes is for Entra, moving from MIM, role-based memberships, or identity birthright for users and groups. So I would recommend looking at the identity governance Learn article that goes over lifecycle workflows, access packages, access reviews. You can always get a trial for P2. The identity governance is out there, so you can try it for yourself. Um, that is my recommendation. I think we have one more. I think our last question for the day before we sign off here is based off of uh, unique value provisioning. Someone had a question about, you can generate a unique username for provisioning. Um, that's that's built into provisioning service. You can do it, but can you do it for something else? They mentioned some other type of UID. So yeah, again, um, there is a solution that there is a function called create unique value, and you point towards certain attributes. It'll check Entra ID and AD. That's the only thing it does check currently. So you can use that if those two repositories are safe for that uniqueness check. You can save it to a different attribute if needed. If you need to go outside that, which a lot of people do, you'd probably call a logic app to do that before you send that data to the provisioning service. So the logic app can reach out to different stores and get values back and check them. And that's about it. Again, if you're still here, if you want to register, hopefully we'll see you in a few weeks, actually 3 weeks from today, and we'll start talking about how we're going to trans transform you from MIM to Entra ID. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.